President Trump recently hosted MBS at the White House, who said he wants to be part of the Abraham Accords, but that there needs to be a path to a two-state solution. How do you square that with your view, I believe, where you have said there will not be a Palestinian state?
For anyone paying attention to everything that's been going down in the Middle East, not just over the last 2 years, but over several decades, you know exactly how Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is about to answer that question. But I do think it's important for you to hear it yet again, because it is another piece of evidence that Netanyahu, the Israeli government, and Israel in general has been one of the major obstacles to peace in the Middle East. Take a look.
Well, there was a Palestinian state. It's called Gaza. That's exactly what it was. It was a de facto state, and we didn't get peace. What we got was the most horrific massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
Except Gaza was not a free and sovereign Palestinian state, as we all know. While it's true that Israeli settlers and Israelis in general did leave the Gaza Strip in the early aughts, it's also true that Israel has had complete control of the enclave, of that area of land, ever since Israelis had left the Gaza Strip, right? So Israel controls its borders for the most part. Israel controls what goes in, what goes out, meaning Israel controls trade in Gaza and before the genocide started, they had cut Gaza off from being able to participate in the world economy. As we all know, Israel has controlled Gaza's electricity, its water. And ever so often, the IDF soldiers would go in to mow the lawn, meaning just slaughter Palestinians. So to say that Gaza was a Palestinian state and, oh, precious, innocent, Benjamin Netanyahu allowed them to have their state, and he was thanked by the Palestinians through this act of violence that was carried out by Hamas is ridiculous, especially when you remember that Netanyahu himself facilitated the funding of Hamas. That's what he likes to do. He likes to fund or facilitate the funding of various groups, and then he points to those groups, says that they're a problem, tries to go to the United States to fight them, or uses the groups that he propped up as justification to carry out atrocities and genocide. So what else does he have to say? Let's take a look.
If you ask Israelis now, and it just covers an enormous spectrum, I mean, from left to right, we had a vote in the Knesset. We have 120 Knesset members, 99 to 11, 10 abstained. 99 to 11 opposed being forced on a Palestinian state. I mean, that tells you something.
Okay, so this conversation he's having is with Andrew Ross Sorkin for the New York Times annual DealBook Summit. And he goes on to, fearmonger about Palestinians and say all sorts of disgusting things about them. If you want to watch it, you know where to find the video. It's on YouTube. I'm not going to play that here because it's a waste of time and I don't want him repeating his disgusting bigotry here on the show. But nonetheless, I will say that the argument that this is the argument he's making, that the entire Knesset also likes to dehumanize the entire population of the Palestinian people and essentially rob them of their freedom and human rights isn't really the own that he thinks it is. That's not really much of an argument. You're just, it's an indictment of the Knesset. But, it's interesting because Netanyahu isn't really telling you the full story here. Because just recently, the Knesset held a vote to codify President Donald Trump's so-called peace plan, which I've been very critical of, okay? But if you're a big believer that Donald Trump's peace plan is in fact a real peace plan that will lead to a two-state solution, I question that. But if you believe that, understand that the Knesset holds the vote. It does pass, but it manages to pass despite the fact that the Likud party boycotted the vote. And the Likud party, of course, is the party that Benjamin Netanyahu identifies with. So Netanyahu should be asked by Andrew Ross Sorkin, why is it that you and your party called for the boycott of a vote in the Knesset that would have codified the peace deal that was brokered by President Donald Trump? That would be an interesting question to ask, but unfortunately, we didn't get any of that. Now, I do want to just give you one other piece of video here from the conversation that he had with Andrew Ross Sorkin, because if you ever questioned whether Benjamin Netanyahu has a lust for war, I think this next clip will answer your questions.
We will change the face of the Middle East. We will win this war, because it was clear to me that we were not only fighting Hamas, we were fighting Hezbollah, we were fighting the Assad regime, we were fighting the militias in Iraq, we were fighting the Houthis, we were fighting Iran. And we did. We won this war. We won this war, but it's never ending. It's like, if you have cancer and you take it out, it can still come back. It's certain types of cancer. But if you don't take it out, you die.
I really wish the Israeli people understood the cancer that the current Israeli government happens to be. Now, I know a lot of people think, no, this is part and parcel of the Israeli society. I think that societies can change. I think that there are some insane, sentiments that have mass appeal in Israel right now, and it really makes me sad. But it wasn't always that way. But when you want to talk about, I would argue, the biggest enemy to the well-being of Israel, it's people like Netanyahu. Because you just heard him say that the war never ends. Because he doesn't want it to end. He's never wanted peace. The fact that the Likud party boycotted that vote to codify Trump's peace deal is just more evidence that these people do not want peace. They have proven it time and time again. And so again, when people tell you who they are, you should believe them. Netanyahu tells us who he is day in and day out. So we should believe him. I know I do.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.